teachings and traditions. This is your host, Father Evan, and we're streaming to you live here on Ancient Faith Radio. I'm glad you're with us. Of course, if you are tuning in tonight, you can do that in several ways. One of those is to be listening live on Ancient Faith Radio, and you can stream that on whatever device you're using. And you can also tune in by watching the program on YouTube. And if you'd like to do that, you just hop on over to YouTube and search us up by Ancient Faith Media, and you'll get to our channel. And we're also streaming to you live on Facebook, and same things there. You just go to the Ancient Faith Ministries page. Of course, I know many of you, thousands of you, listen to this program later as a podcast, and we appreciate you listening. And of course, we encourage you, if you've never done it, go on and write a review and share the program and Ancient Faith with your friends. It's one of the ways to spread the gospel and to share the good work here at Ancient Faith Radio. Of course, love to speak with you live, and if you'd like to do that, you can call in at 1-855-237-2346, or you can record a question while we're off air using the Ancient Faith website to do that, or you can always email me at orthodoxylive@ancientfaith.com. Well, we've hit the fourth week of Lent and the fourth Sunday of Lent, and as I was mentioning in the transition with Alyssa, we get a reading from Mark chapter 9, verses 17 through 31, that many people focus on the aspect of Christ's teaching that relates to a couple of the spiritual disciplines that we find in the Lenten season, prayer and fasting. But 6 times the gospel today mentions faith or belief. That's really the focus of this passage, and it begins with the Lord describing those he is encountering as faithless, and then encouraging them to understand that if they believe, then all things are possible to him who believes. And then later, the Father's response to all that. There's a father with a sick son who's come to Jesus for healing of his son, and the Father says to Jesus, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." And there's really a progression there, a description of the condition maybe we all find ourselves in, the hope that we all have, that if I have faith, then the promises of God will become possible for me. And then, of course, the reality that I've got this little bit of faith, but I need God to impact the spot and the place in my life where I am struggling to believe. So it's appropriate because perhaps we entered the Lenten journey with aspirations of spiritual renewal and change, and here we are 4 weeks in, and we've realized, nope, it didn't happen, and maybe even I seem to be worse now than I was when I began. And so this reading is really a comfort because we have to recognize the need to get up and try again. That's what Jesus is saying. Wherever you've been, trust me now, and get up and try again. All right, well, I'm going to get out to the phones. We've got full lines, and again, if you're trying to get in and you're not able, just give us a minute as one of our callers drops off. That'll open up a line for you at 1-855-237-2346. Let's go out to our first caller, Samuel. Welcome, Samuel, to the program.
Hi, Father Evan. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, where are you calling from?
I'm here from Scottsdale, Arizona. Well, technically Phoenix, but I go to Assumption Greek Orthodox with Father Andrew and Pres Andrea, who I believe you know.
Yeah, totally. No way. So Pres Andrea was many years ago. She used to babysit myself and my siblings. I was a teenager. Yeah, it's kind of funny. And then, of course, I've known Father Andrew for quite some time. But that's a lovely parish that you attend. You have to tell them hello for me.
I will. It's stunning. And I'll be seeing you, I believe, in June for a wedding in Loveland.
Okay. No way. That. Whose wedding are you coming to?
Shannon and my brother Joshua.
Oh, no way. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, I've known Shannon, obviously, since she was a little kid. And I just met your brother, and he's lovely. And that's wonderful. Well, I'm glad you'll be up here in June. That's wonderful. What's on your mind tonight? What do you want to talk about?
Well, something that's kind of eating away at me. Struggling to figure out how to handle it moving forward. One of my best friends also happens to be my cousin, godfather to my daughter, also Orthodox, obviously, is getting married in August. Okay. And he has decided to get married outside of the church in his fiance's church, a Protestant church there in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And he asked me to be in the wedding. But I'm struggling to figure out how to love him best and what my involvement, obviously just attending the wedding or being a part of it in the bridal party, and curious what the church would say about how you participate in that.
Sure.
Obviously there's ramifications and fallout for him, but what would you say to someone in my shoes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, strictly speaking, the church does speak with some clarity around the idea of our participation in worship services other than those in the church, in which we will be making or participating in a way that works in opposition to the truth, and is in, let's say, direct opposition to the teachings of Christ and the church. This is a fairly rare thing anymore. I mean, there was a time, and there still are instances in which perhaps we would be invited to participate in a worship service, and doing so would be a grave spiritual mistake. Most of the time, when we're invited to participate in, let's say, a friend's wedding, and they're getting married outside, by a minister or a friend or in their church, Roman Catholic or otherwise. This past week, I attended a funeral for an old parishioner's mother passed away, and I went to the funeral. Of course, I didn't concelebrate, or I can't, and I wasn't required to make any sort of creedal affirmation, right, or statement of faith. I just sat in the pews respectfully, prayerfully, to demonstrate my love and respect, right? Then on the other side, I was at a funeral a couple of months ago of a very engaged, involved member of our parish, and I was invited to give a eulogy, and I did. In fact, in consultation with my hierarch, he was clear about, how I dress. In other words, I don't wear my vestments, but I can certainly proclaim and preach the gospel in that setting. I'm mentioning these sort of various realities because when you're asking that question, I need to paint a fuller picture so that people who are maybe in a similar situation wouldn't err themselves by either withholding their participation or being involved in a way that they shouldn't. For example, if someone was to ask to be a godparent in another church or to receive the Eucharist at another church, we would say, no, well, we can't do that because we don't share the same faith. We share elements of the same faith, but there are things that we do not share. I think if you're being asked to be a groomsman, I think it's okay. I don't think that the church would seek to prohibit that level of participation, right? And so in that way, I'm not sure what he's asked you to do or how he's asked you to be involved in the wedding. But I think that would not be something, being a groomsman, right, that would be prohibited in any way by the church. So, I mean, just because I'm curious, how has he asked you to be involved?
In any way a groomsman would be, of course. Oh,
yeah, standing up
in all
with
the
him.
Pictures and
yeah. I don't think, again, the church doesn't prohibit that level of participation and recognizes that really that level of participation is an act of love, right? It's an act of relationship, and we want to maintain that. And, you know best, Samuel, whether or not your decision not to participate, how that would wound the relationship and wound your ability in the future to have maybe a conversation you need to have with him about, where's he going spiritually, right? Does that make sense?
And on that note, it does. Last follow-up here.
Mm-hmm.
How can I best love him? I always reminded of Father Thomas Hopko's words about not giving unsolicited advice. But at the same time, I'm witnessing his voluntary
excommunication
from the body of Christ. And
I think it really
it's a struggle, but as he's the godfather of my youngest little girl, but I'm not sure where my responsibility begins and where I toe the line for unsolicited advice and how I can best.
Well, I mean, it depends on the relationship, right? So, with my spouse, I'm going to speak pretty freely, right? With my child, with a best friend, as you extend outward, that changes. It also changes when there's an invitation to speak. So one of the things you can do is see if there is a willingness to have a conversation by simply asking. You can go to your cousin and say, hey, I've got some thoughts about your upcoming wedding and your relationship to the church, your godparent to my daughter, and are you open to having that conversation? If not, that's fine, because you don't want to kick a door in. You'd rather have someone open it. And then if they open it, then of course the approach should be one in which we're humble and patient and kind, and we're listening, maybe listening a little bit more than talking, and trying to build a bridge and a connection so that you can continue to have conversations and to, it's the work that you do as a priest, right? I can't get people's arms behind them and twist them. I have to listen and I have to move. With some people I can move a little quicker, others slower. You got to sort of read the situation and know the person. And so that's part of, I can't tell you exactly how to do it, Samuel, because you know him better than I do. And you'd best be able to sort of describe and understand the relationship you have with him. So God give you strength as you navigate this. It's a tricky space, but it's important that you don't give up the opportunity to be in his life and to be a person that can talk to him about things like this, because it might be that you're the only one that will. So, God bless, and I guess I'll see you in June, huh?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet, Samuel. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for calling. Okay. Well, as Samuel drops off, that'll open up the line for you if you've been trying to get in at 1-855-237-2346. We're going to go to our next caller and take a call from Charlie. Charlie, welcome to the program.
Hey, Father. How are you?
Good, Charlie. How are you doing?
Pretty good, thank God.
Why don't you share where you're calling from?
I'm calling from Orange County, California.
Is it super warm there right now, or is it kind of mild? What's? I mean, it's really hot here today. It's kind of crazy.
It's kind of cold and rainy. Yeah, it's been weird. It's been cold and rainy, but then you get like a nice day and then cold and rain again. So
spring.
It's not the typical Southern California weather you'd expect.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about tonight?
So, two things. One, you're going to be joining us, I think, in July for the Orthodox Young Professionals Conference.
Mm-hmm.
I want to just briefly talk about that. And then I do have a question regarding the theme of our topic or theme during the conference that I'd love your opinion on.
You bet. Well, why don't we start with the question, and then we can talk a little bit about my upcoming visit to Southern California.
For sure. So there's a growing number of single young adults within the church, all of whom are trying to find a spouse. However, there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to marriage and commitment.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is more and more young adults within the church are not getting married until later in life. I don't know if it's necessarily by choice, but it just hasn't happened for them yet.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, what do you think is driving this, and what can we do to change course, especially for those seeking to be married soon?
Yeah. Well, I think, part of what's happening is that, the church is not, immune from what's happening in the larger society, right? And one of the things we know, just if we just measure it, is we know that the marriage rate has been declining steadily for decades, right? And, in America, from its height, people are 65% less likely to get married today than they were when people were at their height getting, in other words, fewer and fewer people are getting married. We also know that the time in which people are getting married is anywhere from 10 to 15 years later than when they typically did. So, when people in the past would get married in their early 20s, maybe even late teens, 18, 19, like my mother, for example, today that's almost unheard of, right? And people are getting married in their 30s or mid-30s, right? And another larger demographic that it's playing out is that as men age, they don't tend to seek a spouse in their same age demographic, but they tend to seek a younger spouse. So really bad news for women who have been caught up, let's say, in this creep in terms of the age in which people first get married, and also the creep in terms of the decline in marriage. And so if you're a woman in the church and you find yourself in your late 20s, mid-30s, and you're not married, one of the things you're facing is the fact that men who have also waited, when they do try to find a spouse, they're typically looking at a spouse that's younger, than themselves, 7-8 years younger, in their mid to late 20s, if they're in their mid 30s. So those are some of the demographic, things that are going on. Now, also, I think there's a spiritual element, as we would imagine. Spiritually speaking, I think that we have, in some ways, lost our appreciation for some of the gospel tenets, right? So, the gospel really posits our salvation in sort of language that's relational, right? And the church believes that marriage is for salvation. And it's not simply getting your wants and desires, right? It's actually a sacrificial act, the raising of children being the same. And so the pursuit of a spouse in the church traditionally was also viewed as a spiritual exercise, right? It wasn't a matter of convenience or simple attraction or the pairing up of, let's say, someone who was compatible. These were not necessarily the number one reasons for marriage that people thought about. And again, in the church, the idea that one would marry young and grow alongside of someone and repent of their selfish attitudes and ways in the midst of their marriage and raise a family and multiple children. These are spiritual tenets that we've sort of lost track of, right? And instead, we've even raised our children in the church to work first on their careers, to work first on their sort of social and professional accomplishments, and not on their relationships, right? And we're increasingly a society that isn't building deep and abiding relationships. So these are some of the factors that are, swirling and surrounding, our churches, and we're not immune to them. And I think there needs to be a greater emphasis in the church of returning to that. Now, if you find yourself in this reality, you find yourself in your late 20s, mid 30s, early 40s, and you want to marry, there are, I think, some changes that you're going to have to make that maybe young professionals, middle-aged professionals have not yet been willing to make. And that's going to be adjustment around, finding a spouse that's of a similar age versus a man saying, well, I want to find someone who's in their mid-20s, right? Well, wait a minute. If you're in your late 30s, early 40s, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I think you have to make an adjustment in terms of, what type of family structure are you going to have? Maybe you're past childbearing, and so adoption, right, is going to have to be on the table. You're going to have to reorient yourself about what's important, right? Marriage being about salvation and really building a life of sacrifice and repentance with somebody, as opposed to, the sort of unicorn list that maybe some people have. And as we get older, we start to dial in that list a little bit. We get a little bit set. And we lose some flexibility. That's just a reality as we age in all respects. Like I can't touch my toes the way I could when I was 18, and I'm mostly not as flexible emotionally as I was when I was 18. And so introducing flexibility in my thought and my thinking, right? So, Charlie, there's a lot there, and to be honest with you, these are just a few hints, to be frank, about some of the elements that I want to sort of draw out and get more detailed about in that retreat that you mentioned. So I'm looking forward to being with you in July. I don't know if you have a redirect on what I was saying, but I'd love for you to share kind of the details around the retreat and how people who are out there and are single in the church can sign up and attend.
Yeah, so I think you touched on some points that I think we're all experiencing within the church. I think there's a group of young adults, like you said, late 20s, 30s, and maybe even early 40s that are really trying to find a spouse and get married, and they go to these retreats and they're willing to put themselves out there and hopefully meet the other person, but for whatever reason, and it could be because of these points and much more, that we haven't been able to, find that partner. But, and I'm hoping with this retreat, I'll kind of jump into that, but it's on July 25th, which is a Thursday, through the 28th. And it's going to be in Anaheim, California at the JW Marriott. And we're going to be focusing, primarily on this topic. We're expecting about 200 plus young professionals from all over the country. We have, people coming even from, Alaska and Australia and really worldwide, but primarily
amazing.
North America and Canada. Yeah. And we're all getting together and, it's going to be a weekend full of really great things. We have evening events planned. We have stuff going on rooftops, and we're going to downtown Disney for dinner one night. And, we have a really great weekend planned with you obviously joining us. And during the day, we'll be really focusing on, this topic and really diving into, what can we do differently as young adults to find that, right partner for us, to find our wife, to find our husband, and, to find, be closer to Christ in our relationship. So we're really looking forward to it. And we're so excited to have you with us. But for those who want to sign up, it's there's a website. It's www.oypc.org.
Say that again. Say it a little slower.
www.oypc.org, and it stands for
Orthodox Young Professionals Conference. oypc.org. oypc.org. Got it. Took me a little bit.
Right.
Well, I think.
Yeah. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned some of the events and sort of the practical aspect, and obviously this is an opportunity for people who are in the church and are single to meet other people in the church who are single. But I think there's an emphasis too here on meeting them in order to find a spouse. I have to say, attending is also obviously it's putting yourself out there. It's a little risky. It's there's an element of vulnerability, but there's also, if you will, the idea of if you want to surf, you gotta paddle out. you got to put yourself in the place where the waves are coming, and this is an opportunity to do that, right? There's really no one there that doesn't want to get married. So
that's right, and it's definitely not. I wouldn't want to label it as a singles retreat, but that's right. I think it's an opportunity, whether or not you want, to get married or not. I think it's still a great conference to join. But yes, I would say a majority of those attending are single Orthodox young adults who are like-minded and really want to meet somebody. So I do encourage those who are in the market to, potentially find a spouse and get married soon.
Nothing wrong with it.
Place to meet. Absolutely, for sure. And I think we're going to talk about some really great stuff. And with your guidance, I think, God willing, we'll be able to, get a lot of insight and guidance. So, well,
I'll put it out there too. So, obviously, I'm going to be offering some presentations, and my wife's coming, and she's going to be doing one of them as well. It's an opportunity for women to have a conversation with a married woman, and to hear from her experience of, she was single at one point, and we met actually at a Orthodox singles weekend, and were married shortly thereafter, to be honest with you, and sort of the thinking that went around that, and then I'm going to talk about some of the key elements that we should be looking for, and if we kind of check those off, like how to get over our own reticence and our own hurts and things like that as well. So, Charlie, thanks for calling in. I hope you'll check in again in another month or so. And oypc.org, you can register now to be with us in Anaheim, July 25th through the 28th. I got that right?
That's right. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you, Father.
All right, Charlie. Thanks for calling.
All right. Thanks again. Have a good one.
You too. Good night. So again, you're listening to Orthodoxy Live here on Ancient Faith Radio. The number to call as Charlie drops off, that will open up a line at 1-855-237-2346. Here's what we're going to do. We have a couple more callers to get to. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up with Stephanie. We'll be right back.
Orthodoxy Live with Father Evan will be back in a moment. In the meantime, lines are open at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346.
Jesus' last words to his disciples were, "Go and make disciples of all the nations." Unfortunately, many parishes are struggling to follow this commandment. In Reclaiming the Great Commission, Father Evan Armatas offers a roadmap to help us get back on track. Relying on his 20 years of parish experience, Holy Scripture, and insights from research and his visits with churches across the U.S., he discusses how you and your community can implement changes that will transform, revitalize, and renew your parish. You'll learn how to diagnose and remove the barriers you face, deal with resistance to change, define what a healthy parish looks like, lead with purpose, and create a parish health plan. Written for clergy, council members, ministry leaders, small groups, and all committed parishioners, this book will help any church in its journey to reclaim the Great Commission. Purchase it today at store.ancientfaith.com.
Father Evan is ready for your call, and our lines are open at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Here once again is Father Evan.
I want to thank these next two callers who've been waiting patiently on the line. We're going to go out to Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Father.
It's good to hear your voice.
It's good to hear yours, too.
Stephanie, where are you calling from? I know where, but let's share that with our listeners.
I'm calling from good old Cheyenne, Wyoming.
It is good old Cheyenne, Wyoming. If you've never spent any time in the state of Wyoming, one of the things that you realize very quickly is how lovely the people are. And also, there is so many beautiful places to visit within Wyoming, so many wonderful things to do, but it's an outdoor state. So if you're, as my children sometimes will say, if you're an indoor person, you may find Wyoming not quite your cup of tea, but I love the state of Wyoming. And which parish up there, Stephanie?
I'm at St. Constantine and Helen Greek Orthodox Church.
Which is near and dear to my heart. That's where my great-grandmother and my grandmother and all of my great-aunts and uncles worshipped and were part of, So I've got a wonderful picture of my yaya, of my grandmother, Theodora, standing on the front steps in front of the front doors of the church. And, when I come up there, I always think about that. It still looks the same, even today. And that photo was from probably the mid-40s. So it's quite a memory for me.
Yeah, that's cool. I'd like to see that picture sometime.
Yeah, I have to go through and take a photo of it. It's in my mom's possession at the house in one of her photo albums, So,
yeah.
Well, Stephanie, you and I go way back.
Yeah, we do.
When was the first year that you came and worked with me at camp? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember what year it was.
Well, you were still a traveling nurse, right? Or were you?
Yeah.
Was it even before that?
I'm trying to think. No,
What
I
year?
was a nurse. I think that's what I came for.
Yeah, you came as a nurse. Yeah. So what year did you get out of nursing school?
I graduated 2010.
Yeah, so over 14 years ago, right? Or just about that, right?
That's
hard to
crazy.
believe. Yeah, before you were married, before you had kids, all that.
Yep. Good memories.
They are good memories. Yeah, and I'm thankful that we've continued to stay in touch. And your beautiful husband, Kelly, and your two lovely little girls. I wonder how often people say that they are mini yous.
I probably hear that every day.
I mean, poor Kelly, her husband, does he ever get any credit?
Oh, yeah, for Lillian, especially.
Yeah, especially her coloring, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's true that they look a lot like you too, right?
Yeah, they do. Actually, I was just handed 3 pictures today at church from when I was a little girl. And, yeah, I tried to trick Thea, my youngest, to say, hey, when did you take this picture? Who's in this picture?
Oh, no way. She didn't buy it. That's cute. Funny thing, someone called me texted me this week, your Aunt Val, right?
Mm-hmm.
So her son happened to apply at a law firm where one of the partners is related to me. And so,
oh, no way.
Yeah, so he texted and said, do you know this young man? And I said, oh, I know the family well. And so he was like, oh, interesting. He's like, yeah, I think, we've been interviewing this candidate, and I realized that they're part of the church, and I didn't know if you might know them. And so, yeah, I don't know what'll happen, but it was kind of a neat little connection. The world can be small sometimes, right?
Especially in the Orthodox world.
Yeah, it can feel real small sometimes. Well, Stephanie, what?
I know the family well. Don't hire him.
No, not at all. It's funny. It's pretty important to kind of understand where people are from and their backgrounds, right? At the same time, obviously, the Lord can make anything new, and people can change dramatically. There's a guy years ago that I got to know, and he became, this is in my previous parish, he became a devout, lovely member of the church and a pillar of the parish. But his background was rather different. And, he had something like 40 different criminal charges through his past and into his, late 20s. And then, pretty dramatic turnaround and turned his life over to Jesus and repented and went through a process of repentance and growth. And then, if you met this person, you'd never, right? The Lord can make things new. So, right? So anyway, Steph, I know you and I have been having this conversation, and I thought, boy, this is a conversation that I think other people would benefit from. And so I encourage you to make it public. So that's what you're doing. Appreciate it. Why don't you share kind of the backdrop of what you've been thinking about?
Oh, you want me to go into everything? I was just going to ask.
I think a little bit. I mean, I don't think you have to go too detailed. I mean, keep things, that don't need to be shared out of it. But just the general, that sentiment of concern and maybe even worry about salvation and the idea of like who might be saved. And I think that's important because I don't think you're alone in thinking about that.
Well, yeah. So my husband, Kelly, has been watching a lot of near-death experiences. And so we kind of have both been on this journey of finding answers, because some people have these experiences and they experience heaven, and other people experience hell, and they're very detailed in these things. And so, yeah, we've been on this journey to try and find more answers on salvation. And in this journey, we've been looking not only for Orthodox answers, but also our other loved ones who may not be Orthodox, and what their ideas for salvation are and how to acquire it. So my question for you then, for the audience then, is what's the Orthodox view of salvation?
Yeah.
And
Well, and I think too, I think we recognize that perhaps we can carry as a sentiment the idea that, everybody's going to heaven, right? God is love, and no one's going to suffer eternal separation. And I think when we listen to the scriptures and we listen to the prayers, we recognize that that isn't the way the Gospels or the Lord presented it. It's not the way that the Church has presented it. And yet we have this other tension where we do speak forcefully of the love of God and the mercy of God, that God's love and mercy can overcome any obstacle, right? And any sin. And that, God is the lover of humanity who is in pursuit of us, right? And is trying to draw all people to himself, right? So there's that reality. And so when you ask the question, the Orthodox view of salvation, I think, at least from my understanding of our conversation, is that you're really trying to get also at the idea of like, how do we view the general reality of all the human beings who've existed, right, and have been brought into creation, and will all people find their way into the kingdom? Or,
yeah,
right? Or are there just a few,
Right, because in these videos that or Kelly was watching in two different accounts, they, in their experience with Jesus in heaven, they only saw about 2.5% of the world's population make it to heaven. And so that really hit us hard. Wow.
Yeah.
It is narrow, and we have to take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Church would immediately respond to an exact number by saying that is not scriptural, that's not part of the preaching of Christ. But what is scriptural, what is part of the preaching of Christ is narrow is the way, right? And so we do have the sense that it isn't a wide path, although the path has been laid out and there's clarity about how we can walk that path and enter the kingdom. It's a path not everybody chooses to walk. So one of the views that we have of salvation is that God does call all to salvation. He does and has presented salvation to the world, and there's not some secret list of things and beliefs that one must do and think to enter the kingdom. But not all of us will exercise our will and follow and do the things that God encourages us to do, right? So to put a finer point on it, the Lord says, for example, do not judge and you shall not be judged. It's pretty clear, right? If we were to let go of judgment, then God will release us from judgment. But how many of us do it? Very few. Huh?
We all judge.
Yeah, we all judge. And so there we are, not following. You know, the Lord's clear about mercy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's really clear about it in Luke 6. You know, go read that passage about mercy in Luke 6. It's convicting. And, you know, it seems pretty apparent that he demonstrates mercy, right? Mm-hmm. And he gives us the parable of the unrighteous steward, the unjust steward who's forgiven so much but then can't forgive and show mercy. So there's another example, or generosity, you know, the parable of the Good Samaritan, right, in Luke 10. The parable of the prodigal, and the idea that we will look at our own shortcomings and will repent of them and return. So that's all related to our will, okay? And that principle, that understanding is something that we understand to be a given gift. God gave us freedom, and he's not revoking that. And the reason for that is that you can't be in a relationship if freedom is not a central component, right? I can't force you or coerce you or manipulate you. I mean, I can, but we know that that's not a healthy or real relationship, right? If I coerce or manipulate you, if I dominate you. But a relationship is freedom, right? You choose to be in relationship with somebody and vice versa, right? Mm-hmm. And even in relationships in which the hierarchy is different, like parent-child, eventually the child has to make a decision, right? Do I want to be in a relationship with my parent, right? And the parent can't force them to be. You can try and guilt them, but it doesn't really work. So we understand that that's a God-given gift, and God's not going to revoke that gift, okay? So we can choose to be in relationship. We can choose to by being in relationship, work on things like the releasing of judgment, the showing of mercy, the extension of generosity, and the repenting over our own shortcomings, the reality of sacrificial love. But we may not choose to do that, and so then does God honor the choice? And that's really where we come into this idea of not everyone enters the kingdom, because the kingdom is the relationship with God and one another. And if we've chosen not to live according to that, God honors the choice. It's not like he casts us someplace, let's say. It's more he recognizes that we've exercised our will. And he, just like you do with your kids at some point, you know, you can't twist their arm. You say, okay, you made your decision. I will respect your decision. Now, the difficulty is on the flip side of that, we say, well, is there ever a point in which God's mercy and love for us will cease? And we can't imagine it, right? It runs out into eternity. You know, is there a point where he says, I no longer love Stephanie. I no longer have any mercy in my heart for her, right? That's another thing, that God, he is all merciful. He is all loving. He can't give up what he is. He can't turn his back on himself, you know. To thine own self be true. I mean, that's a human, you know, phrase, but God is always merciful. God is always loving. So then we run that out and we say, well, then is it possible God's mercy and love will overcome our willful disobedience at some point? Is that possible? That at some point he'll outpace our desire to be separate, and as a result, we will have, if you will, a change of heart? And to that, the church says, well, look, we know that in this life that's possible, right? You can do that while you still are in your body. But we don't know, and we don't think it might be possible in the next life. And so that's where I think you and I, when we were talking about that was the part that I think, you know, you were, it was kind of maybe a little bit new to you to think about it that way. Mm-hmm. Is that fair to say? And so you can see where, you know, the church can hope for all being saved, because we hope the love of God can overcome it, our will. and our disobedience. But we also know that God gave us freedom. And we've all had the child that just won't listen, just not going to do it, right? And even when they're little, you can't make them do it, right? You can try and try and try and try and try, and it's not going to happen. Now just magnify that, and in the ways that we are unwilling to listen to God, right? Does this help?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Great to hear your voice. Tell Kelly and the kids hi, okay?
Okay, I will. Thank you, Father.
Okay. Good night, Stephanie. Well, to the long-suffering John. John, welcome on air. I apologize. You called and the board was lit up, and so you are our last caller.
All right. Well, Father, it's wonderful to hear your voice. Very good to speak with you.
Same, John. Same. Tell me what's on your mind tonight.
So I guess this could be maybe a little providential, but Stephanie's question and your response somewhat dovetails with the question that I had. You know about my ongoing conversation with my younger son.
Uh-huh.
And, thanks be to God that he continues to ask questions. He continues to want to kind of probe me for, how I and his mom, my blessed Sherry, entered into Orthodoxy. He's still rather interested in that. So one of the questions that he posed, this is a little ways back because I decided, I'm going to see if I can actually puzzle my way through this. So the premise, we have free will, and you actually just answered that. We have free will. God allows us to make the decisions that we need to make freely because he's a loving God. He's a loving Father. And, of course, at the very, very beginning, that led to the fall.
It did, yes.
So I think I've worked out a couple of ways to address this question. But Chris's question was, in the kingdom, why would we not fall from grace and lose our communion with God all over again? What's going to prevent us from misusing our free will?
Yeah. And so have you puzzled out an answer?
A couple of ideas, yes.
I'd love to hear what you came up with so far.
Oh, all right. So in the garden, kind of a taste of what the kingdom will be. Everything's fine until the enemy arrives. And it is Satan who went ahead, interrupted the relationship, destroyed all that was intended. But in the kingdom, the enemy will be utterly defeated. And so there will be no Satan to tempt us to misuse our free will. That was the first thing I came up with.
Yeah, and this is one of, obviously, the teachings of the church in the sense that we talk about no sorrow, no suffering, right? That all of that has fled away, and there is in the kingdom no longer the fear of death, right? Satan's kingdom, in a sense, the foretaste of that has already occurred, and that's why Paul is wrestling so mightily with those of us who are still catering to the flesh, when he's basically articulating, look, the victory has occurred, and, the fear of death has been obliterated. So therefore, sin, the turning, the division, that's really how we love to think about it in the church, the breaking of the relationship, is not so, how do I want to put it? It's not so strong, right? Right? It's not in this life even. But you're correct. In the kingdom, we can kind of say, well, that has been, completely and totally done away with, right? It's gone.
All right.
Right. Okay. So what's the second thing you came up with?
So the other was, I was kind of wondering, well, why would he come up with that question? And it gets into this entire rethinking that's been going on. I was chrismated less than 2 years ago. I've been thinking about Orthodoxy for a very long time, but it really leads to a kind of a rethinking. I'm a historian, and so I'm always thinking about the past and looking at interpretations of the past. And I think in the Western world, we have a way of looking at free will. Free will is necessarily something which encompasses all decisions, good and bad decisions, decisions that might be morally neutral. They might actually be inherently moral questions. But we have this almost Miltonian paradise lost notion. Well, the important thing is I get to decide free will, whereas what I think I'm coming to understand is there is a misuse of free will.
Yes.
Not all decisions, even freely given, are the right decisions. There's actually a right way to use free will.
Yes.
Okay.
And as we misuse our freedom, we actually enslave it. And so then we would speak of the loss of will in the church. And we would say that the will can be corrupted. And we see this in habitual sin, right? And we see it as enslavement and disfigurement. And there's an effacing. Is it E-F-F-A-C-I-N-G? Effacing.
Right, yes.
We efface the image of God. We can't obliterate it, right? But we can mar it and we can cover it up. And so, our retired Metropolitan Isaiah, this was a topic that he spent a lot of time discussing with his clergy and when he would preach. And he would return to this idea of freedom and the liberation of freedom. And in a lot of ways, you can sort of plant the banner that what Christ really did more than anything was that he recovered the will of humanity.
Okay, yes.
Right? And then when we imitate Christ, we participate in that reclamation. And so, there is, I think, a movement afoot to even discount the idea that there is a will, right? I think some modern thinkers are saying, there's no such thing as free will, right? I've heard that. My neighbor actually came up to me the other day in the street and said, I know you're a Christian, I know you're a priest, and I think it's true that you believe in the idea of free will, but I'm reading more and more how scientists are saying we don't have free will. And right. Now, one of the things that I would sort of add to this reality that is really deeply Orthodox is, we could speak about these sort of theological concepts, and they can almost become, if you will, kind of philosophical. But let us move into the language of Paul a little bit by kind of picking up where he says, now we see dimly, but then we shall see face to face. You remember that? What's he talking about? Well, he's talking about the experience of being face to face with our beloved Jesus, face to face with our beloved Father, face to face with the Holy Spirit. And we're to take that language in some ways very literally, right? Just as a lover comes face to face with their beloved, and as you knew and know, that experience is all encompassing. When you're face to face with your beloved and in love with them, and they're in love with you, there is no turning away.
No.
And
there could be a decision there. I have the freedom to make that decision, but because of that relationship, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to make the right decision because of that person.
Yeah, you're in the arms of, the face of, right? So it's like when you're with that person, and the kingdom is ultimately the direct experience of the love of God, and vice versa. God is experiencing our love. And so that's why we can speak about it in the sense of there's no turning, no variation, no falling away, because we're in the arms of and face to face with. And, it would be unthinkable, even in a human context, when that is occurring, for us to go, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm going to go see this other person right now, and I'm going to fall into their arms and look at them. I don't want to be here right now. Now, I know that occurs in human relationships, but here I'm talking about really a healthy relationship in which the two people have grown in love and sacrifice to one another, right? Where all the elements of what we would describe as a healthy, loving relationship have occurred. It's unthinkable. So I can imagine, I have a very dear friend and his beloved wife who visited us not too long ago. They were here with us recently, and to witness their relationship is really it's transformative. Just to see the way they interact. Now, for me to imagine my friend and his wife, embracing one another, and for one of them to say, you know what, actually, I don't think I want to be with you. I want to be with somebody else. It's unthinkable, even in a human context, right?
Right.
Elevate that to, the pure experience of the love of God and being able to receive that. Oh my gosh, why would you ever turn from that? You what could allure you? A popsicle? A new bicycle? It's that's where, again, we can say to those two concepts you've brought up, this third one's very important for us, because in the Orthodox context, we're always, really returning to this idea of relationship, right? And the love that exists between God and humanity and God. So, John, thanks for calling. Thanks for waiting. It was a wonderful question. I'm so glad we got to end the show with this conversation.
Well, thank you very, very much, Father, and strength to you in this time.
Thank you, John. All right. Good night. God bless you, and we'll see each other soon, I hope.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Well, thanks for tuning in tonight and being with us on this fourth Sunday of Great Lent. And, just looking ahead, for those of you who are investigating Orthodoxy or are part of the church, that we've got a couple, we've got another Sunday, and then the following Sunday after that's Palm Sunday, which, of course, for Western Christians, they've already celebrated Palm Sunday and Easter. And we'll close out the season on May 5th. And so we'll be together again next Sunday. I hope you'll join us at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And for Ancient Faith Radio and Orthodoxy Live, I'm Father Evan. Good night. Thanks for listening, and God bless.